Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be looking at how to make a true Southern classic, pulled pork barbecue, and I'm going to show you how to do it. My name is Stacy Williams and I'm your host. Here we go. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk about what I mean when I say pulled pork. Pulled pork is going to be pork that is cooked for a time and temperature that has allowed the muscular tissue to basically disintegrate at the cellular level, and all the connective tissue and collagen melt and the fat render down, and the meat will simply pull apart. This can be done with a whole hog, this can be done with a loin, this can be done with a ham section, this can be done with pork belly. What we're using today is traditional pork shoulder, aka the pork butt. Now, just because it's called a butt, don't get confused. This doesn't come from the butt. The rear end of a hog is your hams. Okay, this is the front shoulder portion of the hog. We're not using the whole shoulder. We're using just the butt section. When you're cooking at home in a smaller cooker, the butt section really works a little better. These are going to run anywhere from, say, 6 to 10 pounds. And it's going to be able to cook in a reasonable amount of time and be plenty of barbecue to handle you and all the folks coming to your cookout. The great thing about these, when you buy them at your local supermarket, they're normally pretty well trimmed up. What you see in the video I'm going for here is simply to get off any little loose pieces, hanging pieces, sharp corners, things like that that are really thin that will burn up and cause extra crispy burnt parts we don't want over the course of a 6 to 8 hour cook time. Now, what I'm going to do next is actually inject this pork butt with apple cider vinegar. This is not to keep the pork tender and juicy. The fat and collagen, as it renders down, is going to create the juiciness that we're looking for and the flavor that we're looking for. What this is actually going to do for us is cause a longer cook time. When we're cooking in a backyard grill, whether it's direct heat, whether it's an offset smoker like we'll be using today, or a pellet grill, something that we would be using of that size, it cooks faster than a large cooker or a smokehouse. So if you see someone at a barbecue place and they've got a 250, 500,000 gallon smoker, at 250 degrees, it's going to take several hours longer to cook than you will on your regular backyard smoker. And the reason for this is because of the water evaporation. As that meat heats up, the water inside will evaporate. In those larger cookers, all of that water evaporation actually helps, just like sweating in a human lowers their body temperature during the summer, keeps them cool. It does the same thing to the meat. In our smaller backyard cookers, we simply don't have the volume of air to become moist to keep that temperature down. So the meat cooks faster. And if the meat's cooking faster, you have a chance of getting a drier product, not getting to that pull that you're looking for, because we have this misconception that we should be cooking to a temperature, that we should be looking for, oh, my thermometer says it's this degrees, now it's time to pull. And that is not always the case. What we need is heat applied over an amount of time to cause those cell structures to break down and become the tender, juicy meat that we're looking for. And it also allows us time to get all of the smoke that we're looking for. So now that we've got everything all injected, sprayed a little bit on the outside as a binder, and now we'll apply the seasoning. So I'm using 2 Meat Church rubs. I want to blend these flavors. The first is the all-purpose rub. This one is a little sweeter. It's got your salt, your pepper, your garlic, paprika, and just a little bit of sugar content to it. It is not salt heavy. So we can put this on first and get just that base flavor. The reason I love this particular seasoning is because it gives your barbecue a great color. And remember, we eat with our eyes. The second one that we're going to use is the Meat Church Holy Voodoo. I like it because it is a little bit sweet and a little bit spicy. It's salt, pepper, garlic, It's going to have your a little brown sugar in it, but not too much brown sugar, because we don't want to put a lot of brown sugar onto our pork. I know that that's something that you see all the time. It is a misconception. You do not want to do that. You can have a little, but the brown sugar will, and any sugar you put on the meat over that long period of time, will tend to burn up. You know, it'll caramelize first, and then it'll burn over the long period of time. The more appropriate thing to do, if you're looking for that sweet taste with pork, which we normally are, because it's a very good match made in heaven, pork and sweet. We want to go ahead and get that pork cooked and use smoke as the main ingredient. Get our salt levels right. Make sure that we're getting everything to render down properly so all of that pork fat is there, and melt it the way it should be to keep things juicy. And then we can put our sweetness into the sauce. Alright, with the rub applied and allowed to sit for about 15 to 20 minutes so we can really get some salt penetration going on with that pork before we put it on the smoker, we're going to go ahead and get our fire lit, get our smoker up to temp, which you can see there we've already done, and we've got this thing temping out just below the 250 mark, which is where we want to cook all day. We're going to keep it just right around 250, maybe a little bit lower. Lower is not going to hurt my feelings. We're going to cook today with a combination of hickory and pecan. We mentioned earlier that smoke is an ingredient, it's a flavor, and that pecan is going to give a sweetness. And we mentioned that sweet and pork really work well together, and that's one of the places that we can do it without adding sugar. Alright, so we open up the pit and we're going to place the pork butt. I've got a couple other items that are cooking today, so you'll notice I've got a rather large chunk of wood that is sitting over to the right side. So I've got the water pan to the far right, and that helps to keep moisture in the chamber to help extend that cook time and keep moisture flowing over the outside of the meat. That piece of wood is there because with the other items that I'm cooking today, my pork butt's going to be sitting a little further to the right than normal, and I want to ensure that if I add a piece of wood and we get a strong breeze, because on a windy day that draft can pull the fire into the cooking chamber, and I don't want the right side of that pork butt getting charred and burnt while we're waiting on the rest of it to cook. So that piece of wood acts as a little fire block and helps to absorb some of that heat and allow us to cook with radiant heat versus direct heat. We don't want that coming into the cook chamber that way. Normally we wouldn't need it. If I were only cooking the one item today, I would simply put that item as far to the left as possible, and we wouldn't have to worry about it at all. Alright, so while that pork butt's cooking, obviously we have time. We're going to go ahead and make barbecue sauce. There's no reason to make delicious pulled pork barbecue and then use a store-bought sauce. Now I'll put the full recipe in the description down below, but to give you the highlights, we're going to start out just like every barbecue sauce with tomato sauce. We're going to be adding to that some herbs and spices, a little thyme, a little garlic, salt, pepper, paprika, a little onion powder. Those are some standards. We're also going to give it a little bit of mustard powder. Very, very standard ingredient in barbecue sauce. A little cumin, just for some bite. And of course, we can't forget a large helping of brown sugar. We're going to give these a nice stir and get them incorporated into the tomato sauce, and then we'll be adding in our liquid components. And some of the main liquid ingredients we'll be using are molasses, apple cider vinegar, Texas Pete hot sauce. Now, one ingredient that you will not find in the recipe is smoke, because we're not putting artificial smoke into our barbecue sauce. We already have the smoker running, we already have smoke going through it, we're already burning the fuel, we're making the barbecue. We need to go ahead and add that same exact smoke to our barbecue sauce. So we're going to pop this thing open and just set our pan right into the smoker. By the way, if you're wondering what that is, I just pulled off the smoker. Be sure to check out our video on smoked queso. Alright, so it's been about 4 hours and we're going to check in and see how things are going. Around the 2-hour mark, I came out, added some wood, and just peeked in to check. And as I expected, knowing my cooker, because I use it so much, when I'm cooking, over in the middle section of that grill, we get a lot of heat going underneath the meat. So I did place a foil boat underneath to keep the bottom from getting overcooked. We're not looking for that crispiness on the bottom and dried out parts. So we got that under there. You can see it's got a beautiful color. The bark is starting to develop. Give it a temperature check just to see where we are. At this point in the cook, we're probably going to be sitting around the 160 mark, maybe 165, which means as pork, I could pull it and eat it right now. We'd be slicing it into steaks. It would definitely not pull apart and fall apart. It'd still be delicious. But obviously that's not what we're looking for. We're going to let it keep going. Now, one thing that I don't want that outside to burn. And one of the things I can do to help keep that moisture on the outside and keep this thing cooking evenly is give it a little spritz. And that spritz in the bottle there today, because I'm using pork, is apple cider vinegar. And while we're out here, we'll go ahead and check the fire, see if we need to add another log. Alright, so in order to add a log, we've got to do a little bit of rearranging in the firebox. We want to make sure that we're keeping our coal bed low and spread out so that we can get maximum surface contact when we put a new log on, and we can keep the flames low. We want the new logs to ignite quickly. That's why we put them inside that chamber, to help them get any excess moisture out of them so they'll light more quickly. We're going to take the logs that are existing, get them turned around the coal bed, spread that coal bed out thin, use it as a base, and then we're going to lay the new log right across it. And hopefully what we'll see here is that this thing will ignite very quickly. At this point, we've taken in most of the smoke that we're going to get, and what we don't want to do is give a lot of dirty smoke with the thing first starting out. So boom, you can see right there that ignited very quickly. We're going to get all the way through first combustion to second combustion and be burning a nice clean fire. The one thing I see before I close the lid, those flames are a little close to the cook chamber. I don't want them jumping inside if a gust of wind comes around. So we're going to go ahead and try to pull the coal bed and the remaining logs back just a little bit to get that heat a little closer to the end of the firebox. And as you can see, that immediately allows the flames to get a little bit shorter. And as we close the lid and it loses a little bit of that extra oxygen that's going in, those will get down to a more manageable level and not cause us any temperature spikes. Alright, we are right about 8 hours into this cook. We're going to go ahead and get this temperature checked one more time. We should be sitting right around 195 to 198 degrees. I want to get to that 195 point, and I want to hold it at that temperature. So to make sure that I'm holding that, we're going to wrap this whole thing in foil. I'm going to take it inside where I've got my oven set at 170. I'm going to place it in there while I get my other items ready for dinner. We're going to have some fries and some coleslaw, and I'll get all of that made while this thing is resting in the oven. It'll hold at that 195. It'll actually raise a little bit, probably touch 200, and then it'll start to easily sink back down as it rests. And right around that 170 mark is where I'm going to be ready to pull this thing apart. Alright, so let's see how we did. Now, I can tell you this thing smells absolutely amazing. Hickory and pecan, always a good choice. Go ahead and get this bone out, which should come out perfectly clean if we've done what we should. And it looks like we have. So there we go. Very little bit sticking to it, which means I probably could have let it go on for another 30 minutes or so. But I think we're still in great shape. This thing should pull very, very nice. So I've got a container, and we're just going to use our hands. I love the fact that, you know, they make things like bear claws and try to sell them to people as a good way to do pulled pork. But I mean, pulled pork should be your hands. I mean, watch this. Look at that. It just mashes and pulls apart. There's no tool required to get that done. All right, and with the pork pulled, we'll go ahead and plate it up. Put a little pulled pork on the side there with some nice fries, a little coleslaw, whatever sides you want. That beautiful barbecue sauce that is absolutely delicious and tangy. You can see the nice pink from the smoke ring. You can see the solidness of the bark on the pork. It is absolutely delicious. It's juicy. It is ready to go and 100% awesome. We're giving away a 5-piece cast iron lodge cookware set when we hit 1,000 subscribers. All you have to do is like a video and subscribe to the channel to be entered in the giveaway.